evening to you, and welcome to this interesting and enlightening interview focused on the pivotal role of values education in shaping the communities of the Caribbean and the rest of the world. Now, today we have the distinct privilege of speaking with two esteemed authors who've written a book that speaks to values education. They are Dr. Roger Packham, who is Associate Professor at the Western Sydney University, and Dr. Margaret Taplin of the Institute of Sathya Sai Education of Human Values in Australia and Hong Kong. And we also have joining with us Lalu Vashwani, Director of the Sathya Sai Institute of Education of the West Indies, and Dr. Gautam Tawari, who is chairman of the Sathya Sai Institute of Education in the West Indies. Quite a mouthful, but it's wonderful to have all of you with us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'll start with you, Mr. Vashwani. I deliberately said we're talking about values education without explaining anything about it or going into it. So let's start there. Let's talk a little bit about first the Sathya Sai Institute and then get into what exactly is values education.
Okay, thank you very much. The Sathya Sai Institute of Education is part of a global organization of the Sai Institute of Education, and it is part of the international committee that supervises and promotes SSEHV worldwide, including in 40 Sathya Sai schools and 27 institutes of Sathya Sai education and programs of SSE. And the Institute of the West Indies is under the umbrella of the SSIO Education Committee. The purpose of the Institute is to promote a unique program of character development that is inculcated alongside with academic excellence to promote not just academic excellence, but the wholesome development of character in the individual so that education is a lifelong experience and not just for getting a degree or earning a living, but to transform one's life forever.
All right, so let's talk now to Dr. Tawari. Talk to us a little bit more about values education, and as someone who works directly with it in this part of the world, in the Caribbean, talk to us about how it is implemented and what are some of the results that you've seen as a result of the utilizing of values education in schools.
Well, thank you, Tisha, and good afternoon to all the Barbados viewers. We are fortunate to have 5 Sathya Sai schools in Trinidad. They have been in existence since 2015, and I've been privileged to be, to travel along with them in this adventure. We have 4 preschools, and we have 1 primary school in Trinidad. And just to give an idea of, the preschools, they are government assisted, and because they're government assisted, they're run or administered by a government appointed administrator. And 2 of these schools are in a rural area. So the administrator of that area also has other schools, in a ambit. And she told me recently, some time ago, that our schools, our preschools in the area are considered the convent schools of the area, because, normally associate convent with discipline, etc. So that's, how she described, and she's not a member of our institution, or she's not a member of the organization. She is simply, appointed by the government Ministry of Education, and that's the comment that she has made. So we've been using education and human values alongside the curriculum. The purpose of EHV, or Education and Human Values, is really to teach a student not just how to make a living, but how to live. And these values are not taught, but they're brought out because these values, human values of peace, truth, love, right action, and nonviolence, they're inherent in every human being. And the reason we are called human beings is because we're supposed to practice these human values.
All right, so Dr. Packham, you co wrote the book, How Values Education Can Improve Student Teacher Well-Being. What motivated you to write the book?
I'd experienced education and human values in action in many places in India, in England, and around the world through a UN Habitat project, which used EHV in education. But my sense was that it was those who encountered it found it very valuable and expanded it, but it wasn't being used in mainstream education to the degree I thought it should be. And one of the reasons for that was that it was based on very practical, useful guidelines, but it wasn't linked to underlying educational theory, which, of course, is what our teacher education universities and colleges want. And so, one of the aims of the book was to link the practice of EHV to outline that in a very straightforward, simple way for teachers that they can easily use, but to also link it to the underlying educational theory and to justify what we mean by values, why our 5 core values are so important, and how they fit into a lot of educational theory. It had the overall aim, of course, of improving student and teacher well-being, because we feel that is the outcome that has been shown time and time again with values education.
And for you, Dr. Taplin, I'm interested in hearing your perspective as co author.
Well, Tisha, one of the most important reasons why we wanted to write something practical for teachers is because they're not it's not that they're not implementing it because they don't believe in it. I think teachers are, by nature of who they are, people who have good values and want to convey these values to the students they teach. So we all agree that there's a need for human values, but one reason that causes difficulties for teachers to actually implement it is that they're already so overloaded that they just feel they can't take on anything else. And I hope that's something we can come back and talk about a little bit more later on. But it's also that they're not necessarily taught how to teach about values in effective ways that are not going to be an additional time-consuming burden to them. So they often ask questions like, what values are we supposed to be teaching and how can we actually do it? And one of the aims of the book is to give them an overview of the Satyasai Education in Human Values framework, which is simple, but it's also a very profound way of helping them to be able to address these questions.
All right, so let's go back to Mr. Vishwani. As the director of the Institute of Education here in the West Indies, how do you perceive education generally across the Caribbean region? And how do you think moving toward a values education perspective can assist in the way we teach?
Well, I think that we are very fortunate in the Caribbean that our respective governments pay a lot of emphasis on providing education for all their citizens and, in fact, are provided free of cost. And however, generally speaking, the focus has been on academic excellence which is not a bad thing in itself, but yet it's not complete. And so by having a program of such as education in human values or values education integrated in the subject matter, uh, a slight change of focus can help the teacher in enabling his student to realize a different perspective, so that if they were doing a simple subject in mathematics and they were saying 10 minus 5 is 5, that's true. But an integrated lesson would say a farmer had 10 cows, his neighbor had none. How many did he have left? He gave 5, so he has 5 left. So you do the same arithmetic, and so the values are integrated. Or if you're doing biology, or so you talk about planting a seed, how does the seed receive the water? The roots grow, the roots reach a rock under the soil. Does the root stop, or does it persevere and goes around the rock, reaches the water, and then shares it with the rest of the plant? So it is integrating the, the subject matter along with the values orientation to help the student perceive it. And what is unique about the SSEHV program in terms of teacher training is that the program is structured to help you to experience these values, and therefore you can then transmit it based on experience. Because talking about something theoretically, you should not smoke, and you're smoking, the teacher has to be an exemplar. So by experiencing the values, but where are these values kept? These values are all inherent in each of us. And there are many values, but our organization focuses on 5 fundamental values, which are universal: truth, right action, peace, love, nonviolence, and all their associated aspects. So if you're talking about love, you're also talking about sincerity, you're also talking about compassion, you're also talking about caring. So you have a wide range of aspects that can also be focused on. But the program is also structured to deal with the individual domains, so that you start with a universal quotation that is inspiring, and then that quotation may go into a song that reinforces that particular value, and then there is a story that is discussed with the child, and then there's a role play, and then questions and answers to to elicit that the student has received the message that the teacher is trying to convey. And they may also say, well, okay, since we are doing talking about caring, for the next week, every day at home, you will assist in clearing the tables, assist in fixing your room, things like that, so that they take on values oriented aspects. And it's a process that allows them to use their conscience in making the right decisions. This is not about telling a child what to do, but to show them that the answers are within you. And when you reflect on it, you have a voice within. We call it the conscience that tells you, you want to do something wrong? No, I don't think my parents would approve of that. No, I don't want to do that. It's not good for me. And help you to make the right choices. And by reinforcing these choices, your character is developed.
Now, Dr. Tawari, you are in the unique position of seeing this in action in Trinidad. Uh, so, how do some of the other mainstream or so called mainstream schools compare in terms of results that you're seeing with the children who are attending these Satya Sai schools as compared to the other mainstream schools in Trinidad?
Well, Tisha, remember Lalu said at the beginning that the end of education is character. But also we focus on the academics. And our school, primary school, they have sat two SCA exams in Trinidad. That is secondary school entrance exams. All right. And we have got pretty good results for a very young school of only 8 years compared to other schools in the region. But in addition to that, the behavior, the discipline in our schools really stand out compared to other schools. We're pretty young, in the education business in Trinidad. When I say young, in the question of schools, our schools are pretty new, established only in 2015. So, but our results have been excellent so far. I want to make one more point also. In this age of TikTok and social media, just like in the rest of the Caribbean, school violence, cyber bullying in schools, drugs, school violence is also rampant, in Trinidad, in the regular schools. And it's not found in our schools. The Minister of Education visited our primary school and she was quite impressed with the behavior of our students.
Well, one of the things that you said was the aim, Dr. Packham, of writing this book is so that you could make the link between values education and educational theory generally. Kind of lay it out for us how you think the book manages to cover this, because it seems to be based on what Mr. Vajwani has said, that on the one hand, we're looking at, sharing things that should innately come from the average person in terms of how they approach life, what they do, what they think, in the end, their values, as compared to what he also spoke about, which is an educational system which focuses very heavily on educational theory in practice. So how did you approach kind of bridging this gap through the book?
Well, one of the things that I'd like to link into that is the question of ethics, the question of what is the right thing to do. How do we decide what the right thing to do is, and how do we make sure that our children not only know what the right thing is to do, but actually do the right thing? And traditionally, ethics has been taught in a number of theories, one of which sort of says, well, if you think it's right, in motivism. And that's been a very popular one since the beginning of the 20th century. But before that, we had ideas of duty ethics from Immanuel Kant, and we had the theory of the greatest good for the greatest number of people, which came from John Stuart Mills and another number of others. Now, these are sort of rule-based things that says, this is you do something because it's better for the greater number, for the greater good. With SSEHV, we obviously want people to do their duty. We want them to do things that help the most number of people. But beyond that, we want them to do it through practical wisdom. This dates back to a guy called Aristotle, way back early Greeks, and it's been developed ever since. It was revived in the Western tradition in the around the 1950s and was popularized in the 1970s. And that's the underpinning of values education. And it's those it's the whole point is to get people to develop practical wisdom so that when they have to make decisions, They're doing it because they know this is the right thing to do. And that comes from experience, it comes from practice, it comes from looking at role models, and as earlier said, following what the teacher does. The teacher is the exemplar, and the teacher needs to model the values that we want. So we model the values that we want people to follow, and the students will pick that up. If we model bad values, they'll adopt bad values. Now, we do that with ethics, and we do that similarly with other areas of the education and human values approach, the different teaching techniques, and so on. And in our book, we link that why those teaching techniques, such as storytelling, such as sayings and statements and group work, we point out why they work based on publications and theory that underpins them.
Now, Dr. Taplin, you talk about in the book, all of the challenges that societies around the world are facing, everything from student disengagement to drugs and bad
Mhm.
behavior. And one of the things that you believe this book will do is allow, or values education generally, is allow teachers more or less an easier time in being able to engage with and teach children. Explain to us how the book shares on that aspect of things.
Yes, and I would like to just say that having been a teacher myself, before I knew about this particular framework, I suffered what a lot of teachers these days are suffering, which is succumbing to the stresses and the demands of the profession. A lot are succumbing to burnout. A lot of good teachers are sadly leaving the profession. And I guess because that burnout happened to me as a young teacher, it's something very dear to my heart. Um, we've collected a lot of anecdotes from teachers in mainstream schools as well as in Satyasai schools, and I know that Dr. Hirilal, the principal of the school in Trinidad, has also reiterated that when teachers have put the sexual education and human values principles into place in their teaching and have put it into practice even in small ways in their own lives, they've found that both their professional and their personal lives have become more meaningful, and they've been happier and they've been more peaceful at work. And so they've had better relationships with their students, with their colleagues, and with their families at home. Many of them have said they've become much better spouses and parents because of the practices. And it can be little things, just small things like giving themselves little brain breaks during the day to do some deep breathing, or to just sit with their students for a moment and everybody just sits and listens to their own inner silence for a minute or two, which is a very calming thing to do. Or some teachers have actually visualized their students, because we talk about, we one of the key values that my colleagues have mentioned is the value of love. And we talk to teachers about how important it is to be loving towards students, but they say, well, how can we love students if they're not very likable? So we talk about seeing the good qualities in them, developing empathy and compassion for them. And some teachers have actually made a point of sitting down quietly at the beginning of the day and actually visualising the students in their classrooms and visualising the good in them. So when they go into the classroom, they go in with a positive frame of mind, and they find that makes a huge difference to the classroom environment. So what we found is that it works. It doesn't make their challenges go away, but it does seem to equip teachers with the tools to be able to cope better with the challenges. And of course, as my colleagues have mentioned already, the other really great outcome is that the students' behaviour and concentration and consideration become much better. So the classroom environment then becomes a better place to be. So once the teachers are able to use some of these practices in their own lives, it certainly brings about a win-win situation for them as well as for the students. And as I said, I wish I'd known about these techniques when I was a young teacher.
Well, now let me double back to you, Dr. Packham. if only just for a little bit, to maybe look at what you're sharing within the confines of this book as compared to some of the other themes we're hearing throughout the world. For example, there are many employers the world over now saying that just having qualifications or straight up education is not enough. They're calling for what they call soft skills. What's the correlation between soft skills, which a lot of employers are asking about with this new generation of worker, and what you present in this book on values education?
What you're talking about there, what I call holistic education, and it's education that just doesn't look at the cognitive issues, what students know and so on, or their physical abilities through sports and so on, but it also looks at the emotional side, it looks at the spiritual side, it looks at the whole student, and the book emphasizes this all the way through. That you can't have emotional learning and cognitive learning go hand in hand. If students are not in a good place, they're not going to learn anything. And therefore, we have to, teachers are well aware of this, and the book emphasizes this all the way through. These soft skills are skills of communication, they're skills of group work, they're skills of getting on with each other, of cooperation, of leadership. And these are all the sorts of things that education in human values emphasizes and brings out in all of our teaching techniques, particularly the group work and things like that. We have found there was a government research program in Australia funded by the federal government, $30 million worth over 10 years. And they looked at implementing values education in volunteer schools across Australia and did a lot of detailed research on the how it was implemented and the outcomes. And what they found was that the students performed better, they were happier, the teachers were happier, they were better all-round students and have these soft skills that so many employers are looking for. They just don't want the students to know lots of stuff. They want to be able to put that into practice with groups and with all sorts of different people that they will encounter in the real world.
Now, this brings us back to you, Mr. Vashwani, and I know that we recently had a conference on values education, which was very well received here in Barbados, and you've been advocating heavily, working along with a number of agencies, including the Ministry of Education, to get them to see the value in values education. To your mind, what would it take to start the process of integrating this into the school system in Barbados?
Well, I'd say that there are two approaches to it. In the past, in Barbados, it has been that uh, 30 years ago, we had a teacher's handbook, which was a standard text that a teacher could use. And that book was called the EHV Teacher's Handbook, which had uh, 66 lesson plans using heroes and heroines from around the Caribbean. And that could be used in a 45-minute setting. And we had, over a period of time, maybe about 350 teachers and about 50 principals who were trained in the use of these book and the techniques. And at that time, when evaluation survey was done, it found by the Ministry of Education, the survey results shows that it was widely used in the primary schools, I think 58 primary schools, and the it was very comfortable for them to use it, and the results show that it had a among teachers, it promoted a greater level of introspection, and among students, maybe 44% showed better behavior and 42% better attitude, uh, as rated by their teachers. So it had a positive impact. The other way is subsequent to the conference that we had in the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Conference Center last October 2023, where we invited stakeholders from the 15 CARICOM countries and two non-CARICOM countries. Uh, we found that a great appreciation and interest from teachers' unions around the Caribbean. And as a result, the teachers' unions themselves are keen to have this knowledge for themselves and to extend it from the bottom up by including the ministries of education, parents, teachers organizations as part of their approach to embracing to to improve the environment in which they work. In fact, the Sci Institute of Education has been invited by the Caribbean Union of Teachers to make a presentation at their biannual conference in Antigua next week. And so it can be from both parts. We have seen that uh, the ideal is for us to have this discussion and to see how it can benefit. It can be started with only the schools that you consider vulnerable. See the benefit and extend it. But the point is that we need to find solutions, repeating the fact of how difficult times are. And I don't like to repeat the various things that happen in school, although it's true. The point is, what are we going to do about it? In year 2000, when the Barbados Prime Minister at the time made year 2000 the year of human values, then Professor Henry Fraser, now Sir Henry, said we have to take action. We see things happening and we do nothing. So the result doesn't change. So it is really to have this conversation. The people we are having the conversation are all stakeholders, whether it be the ministry administrators, parents, or teachers, or and principals and unions, and to have this discussion, evaluate it, and see how it can benefit. The other point I may not have mentioned that the Satyasai International Organization, our overall our arch for the global for the world program that we have, our principle is that we are a humanitarian and spiritual organization, of which the education committee is a unit that focuses only on education in the community. But we do not charge for any of our services. This is not a commercial uh, exercise. One of the things our founders said that education, medical care, and education, medical care, and service activities should be done free of cost, especially for those who cannot afford it, so that everybody benefits. But what we see in this day is that there's a commercialization, and I'm not saying commercialization is bad, but it is often at the expense of many persons who cannot afford. And so by having his organizations perform all these activities free of cost, it is the legacy to the world that through this means we show self-sacrifice, and through self sacrifice, we realize our common individual unity among each other, because we realize that outwardly we may be different, but within us, what our common spirit is the same between all of us, and we realize it through these acts of selfless service.
So, Dr. Terari, you're just approaching the 10th year of having this integration into the school system in Trinidad. As you told us, you're in the unique position of having seen it being implemented. Talk to us about maybe some of the challenges that came as a result of bringing values education to mainstream educational institutions. Or was it a situation where there were brand new institutions that were created to teach in this fashion?
But the thing is, teacher, as Labu said, many years ago, teachers in the public system, they were trained in EHV, how to inculcate EHV into the curriculum, etc. But unfortunately, over the years, because whenever administration changes, you know, uh, a new system is brought in. So that is, and that continues to be a problem. But our schools, I can speak about our schools. I could tell you, for instance, that compared to the regular schools that are not involved with EHV, there's better discipline, there's respect for parents, respect for teachers. When you enter our school, there's a peaceful atmosphere. You can actually feel that love that teachers have for students and students have for teachers. And not only that, for instance, one of the aspects of our EHV is a weekly value. These are planned for the year. So every week, I say, for instance, this week our value is peace, or just to give an example. Okay, these children, after they practice these values at school, they take these values back home, and they share it with their parents, and the parents also see how they interact with their siblings. Where previously they were fighting, and resolving conflict through violent means. Now the parent actually sees that the child is using a different, way, or is approaching conflict in a different way. And this impacts on the parent, and this eventually impacts on the community. So it's a win-win situation for everyone: the parent, the teacher, the student, and society as a whole. And I just want to make one more point. A very important aspect of our EHV is silent sitting. I spoke to you about TikTok. This generation, we have in schools now, the attention span is very, very limited. It's very short, and a very important aspect of the day's, activities in our schools is, as Margaret said, silent sitting, where the children sit silently, and the different techniques can be used. But even people who have the administrators, I told you, who do not belong to the organization, they are appointed by the Ministry of Education. They have realized the value of silent sitting, and they have been asking us, how can we use this, take it out into our schools to try and implement it. So it is making an impact, on the community, on the parent and the teacher and the child.
All right, now doubling back to you, Dr. Taplin, and from your vantage point of having been a teacher, I don't think you ever stop being a teacher. Once you're a teacher, you're always a teacher, so you don't get
So
the
yeah.
benefit of retiring. However, from your particular vantage point, you've also seen the implementation and been a part of the implementation of values education in different parts of the world, still as a part of Australia, where you are now and joining us from, and in another part of Asia as well. Do you think the implementation or success of the implementation could depend on the culture in the place that you're seeking to implement it? And what role does that play in getting people to appreciate all that you're offering in values education?
Yeah, I think that this is a really important point that you've raised, and I think that one of the strengths of this particular framework that my colleagues have been describing, and which is described in practical ways, practical, theoretically based ways in our book, is that it's a framework that can be adapted to any culture. It creates a structure. So, for example, we've talked about the 5 human values of truth, right conduct, peace, love, and nonviolence. And we see that as being a structure for developing the whole person. So if you want to develop a person's character holistically, you wouldn't focus just on right conduct, but you try to draw on values from all of them. But those values would be appropriate to the local culture. For example, we had a project operating for 20 years very successfully in mainstream schools in China. And so it was very much focused on their Confucian values. And they found that they were able to draw on those and they could fit into this framework very nicely. Similarly, in a culture such as yours, which is predominantly Christian based, as far as I understand, it's very easy to fit Christian values into this framework, but the framework allows teachers to see that they can give a holistic development and not just focus on one area. I think also that, as my colleagues have said, we encourage teachers to use techniques which they're already using anyway. Storytelling, stories about that are relevant to their own cultures. So we just give them some examples of how they can draw out the values inherent within their culture that are inherent within those stories, or songs from their culture that convey important values messages, quotations from current and past heroes of your area can be very impactful in establishing values messages. And another important thing that we do in the book is to include examples of reflective questioning, because as Mr. Mr. Tuari said earlier, it's not just about telling them what the values are that they should be practicing, it's drawing them out from what's already inherent there within them. And asking questions like, how how do you feel if you behave in your life like a character in this story? How do you feel if others behave in this way to you? And has something like this ever happened to you? And if so, how did you deal with it? And how can you cope with it better if that happens to you again? So it's very simple, practical things that can be taken and can be applied to any cultural or religious context with the values messages that are important to that particular context at that particular time.
And for you, Dr. Packham, do you believe that the book presents values in education in such a way that it can be likened to this book that Mr. Vishwani talked about a little while ago, that was really a hand guide, a handbook for teachers? So in other words, do you believe that a teacher, for example, or a school would be able to pick up your book on values education and be able to institute even certain parts of the framework, even if it's not a cohesive presentation of the framework? Do you believe the book presents itself in a how-to type of way that anyone really, the average person, can follow?
Oh, I do, very much so. That was an emphasis we placed on it. And while we give the teaching techniques, both the direct techniques of silent sitting and quotations and group work and the like, we also give indirect methods. Margaret wrote those chapters on how to incorporate values directly into your lessons. Uh, and we then go further by providing framework outlines for lesson planning, how to plan a lesson step by step. And we give examples that people can follow and then give a general guideline that a teacher can put their own mark on. So it is very practical. And the book that we heard about earlier just goes that one step forward and actually has those lessons presented, but they are direct lessons on EHV. Um, uh, uh, what we provide in the book, in addition to those, are the indirect lessons. So if you're teaching mathematics, or if you're teaching science, or if you're teaching literature, how do you incorporate values into there, and how does it help? How does it make it simple, and so on? And there's a lot of reflective questions going on in there. But yes, it is very practically orientated. The you can take what you want from the book And there is a guideline at the start of the book, so you can go to the theory bits, you can go to the practical bits. The index will take you further as well. We've tried to make it as user friendly and as useful to the practicing teacher as possible, but also to the teacher training setups. And we hope that teacher training colleges will take this book and use it when training future teachers, so they, like Margaret said earlier on, they know as a young teacher how to avoid burnout and how to do things better.
Well, speaking of burnout and staying in step with what's happening across the globe, Mr. Vajwani, how does values education stay in step with technology? Or what place does technology have in values education? We made a few references to TikTok, to what children are seeing online. On the flip side of that, we're hearing a lot about values education, encouraging children to sit quietly in reflection. So, a complete contrasting view to what we see with what's offered to children online these days. So, is technology and the advancement we're seeing in things like AI moving us further away from themes that are presented in a cohesive values education package, or is it adaptable?
I would say that we definitely have to adapt. For I gave you the example that 30 years ago we had a teacher's handbook with 66 lesson plans, and the current approach now is to train teachers or induct teachers into experiencing the various lessons so that they can create each lesson based on their own experiences, because once you have experienced something, it's easier to share how to do it. If you're going to do baking and you know you have done this before, you know how to do it. But if it's just theoretical, you will not have the same level of confidence, or the use of PowerPoint presentations. But essentially, I was once asked, are you going to have an app on which you could do it? But remember, this is about learning. This is a structured process to develop the children over a long period of time, whether it is from primary school, secondary school. It can even be used in tertiary, and it's also used in the workplace for wellness. So we do adapt, but the essence is it's a learning program where the teachers are inducted into how the program works so that they can bring out what is within. Something like what Socrates would call midwifery, where the midwife helps the person to bring out what is within them. And so it is that same concept of uh, helping the teacher to bring out what it is. And therefore, it is not so much about, as somebody asked me whether there will be an app. It's not like that at this point in time, but it is a structured program. They will use the latest technology when you do the PowerPoint presentations. You may have animations, things to make it interesting and relevant. But the point is, the essence will not change. Goodness is goodness, and that goodness has to be nurtured. Apart from being brought out, it has to be nurtured. So uh, I would say that we all focus to ensure that the audience we are focusing on is engaged, and we have to meet them one on one, not one place here and one the opposite side, but we have to focus directly to each other. And if you need newer technologies, I'm sure that's what the younger teachers will be doing.
With that said, and looking ahead, what's your vision for the future of values education here in Barbados, and what do we need to do to be able to move it forward?
I would say to do something as simple as what you have done, which is outstanding. Engage, discuss, reflect, see how it could benefit. And I just wanted to say that this book is available in Barbados in Percy's bookstore, which is within a hardware store in the Wilde area. And it is available there for anyone who wishes to obtain it. And as I say, that our vision is, you asked me for Barbados, but actually our vision is for the world. And but small steps, Barbados, Caribbean, and then the wider world. And that is why we are happy to engage with teachers unions from across the Caribbean who have 26 members, unions who are members of that organization. And that is the level of engagement, and we will move at the speed of consensus. Let everybody be happy. Let them see what it is. Because in the end, who is going to carry out the program? The same professional teachers that we have. This is not some stranger coming in. These are basic human universal concepts, but how they're adapted to make an impact. Because as I said, what is uniquely different about this? It is that it creates lifelong transformation, because today's students are what, Tisha? They are tomorrow's leaders. So if we want a change to see better, we must do it now so that we can ensure our legacy for the future generation is assured.
Dr. Tabari, weigh in. How can we collectively work toward realizing this vision?
Can you repeat that question, Tisha?
How
Can
can
you
we
please repeat it?
collectively work toward realizing this vision of having values education as a part of our educational system in the Caribbean and indeed the world on a wider scale?
Tisha, there's a movement called the transhuman movement right now. And they believe that the human species is flawed, and that we can improve the species by implanting chips, etc., into our brain and different parts of our body. And the reason they think that this is flawed, we are flawed as a species, is because of emotions, all right? And because of, for instance, we can experience love, etc., etc. But the truth is, what EHV is doing is making us realize that we have, and we teach, with it brings out the full potential of the human being. And the full AI can never, you know, have an emotion of love, in my opinion. And I think that we might have AI, but it comes down to basically what makes you a human being, human values. If you have no human values and you have the best education in the world, be it PhD or even beyond, you are not a human being, because we have seen that some of these very highly skilled, educated people can press a button in one part of the world and destroy an entire country in the other part. Why? They lack human values. They lack compassion.
All right, thank you. And finally, to the authors, I'll start with you, Dr. Taplin, only because we'll let the lady go first. What do you want people to take away from this book as we close out this discussion? For people here in the Caribbean, what do you want people who will pick up, who will read this book, to know about the general aim behind the vision behind the writing of this book?
I think, Tisha, what I would hope that they would take away would be that we're not asking them to do something which is going to add to their already busy programs, that we're suggesting there are small ways that they can tweak and adjust the good things that they're doing already, that we're providing them with some examples of the language of values. There's actually a chapter called The Language of Values that can give them some guidelines about how to actually introduce this vocabulary and these concepts to their students. And that it's something that's practical, that is simple to add with minor changes to what they're doing, but it can be very impactful and it can make a change not only to their students, but to themselves and, of course, to the students' families and the wider community. So I think if they can take away from this that confidence that we think through reading this book, it will at least give them an introduction to how they might be able to get started, and that they'll go away with the encouragement to try to get started.
And of course, it's encouragement as well to hear a teacher like yourself talk about wanting to see a book like this years ago and how it might have changed your
Mm-hmm.
own perspective, your own approach
Mm-hmm. Mm.
to teaching.
Yes.
With that, we move on to Dr. Packham. Closing words on what you hope will be the takeaways for people who pick up your book.
I'd like to reinforce what Margaret said, but beyond that, I think this is a book that others can use, that parents who want to contribute to the education of their children, and many parents do, could read this book and understand how they could help their children acquire these values and become better students and better educated. It can also go to community leaders and business leaders to incorporate into their own areas. So we have had health educators, for example, using EHV with their students to improve doctors. We've had nurses using it to upskill nurses to be better nurses. We've had, and in Barbados, you've had corporate leaders talking about how EHV can help corporations. And I think our book, while it's aimed at teachers, can go wider as well. So our takeaway, or my takeaway, is that I hope that this book will be adopted for teacher professional development and will be adopted by teacher training colleges to train future teachers, and will be adopted by community and business leaders to improve business and community. And parents can support their children. So that would be my takeaway. Thank you.
And thank you, of course, as we navigate the complexities of our modern society, whether we're talking about AI or we're looking at many of the challenges we're having with our young people, it's very important to reinforce that instilling core values in young people is of the utmost importance. With that said, Mr. Vajrani, final words from you, and then Dr. Tawari, or on what's next for us here in Barbados in terms of the move toward moving to instill these values again. I know this is something that we saw a lot more of in the society. I can't put my finger on why we've moved away from it in this way, if there's any one thing that we can point to or directly at. But how do we get back to moving in this direction where we focus more heavily on teaching values more so than just straight up education theory?
I think the last sentence you talked about teaching more values, I would put it slightly different. We should focus more on practicing the values, and these are all within us. And the thing that has distracted us is that we see ourselves as, in a way, that we don't realize that all that we seek to do is within us. We don't realize the depth of our own, more than personality, our own being and what we can accomplish. So we lack confidence in the self. And it is through a program like this that helps when they tell you that these values are within you and helps to bring it out. There's a certain self confidence that develops where a child at young age can aspire to be a prime minister or an international leader or a national leader. It is because of the confidence, and that resonates. Because if you ask any parent, what would you prefer? Would you like a great child or a good child? They'd say, I would like a good child. If they are great, that is gravy, that's extra. But what I want is a good child. And so, as I said, the most important thing at this point is engagement, objective engagement, and discussion through not just through all the levels of the stakeholders, similar to what we did with the stakeholders conference. Just keep engaging, and we know what is the right thing to do. And by when you taste it, when you start to practice it in small bits, you will see the fruit. By their fruit you shall know them. The fruit of our actions will give us the confidence that we need to go more.
And final word from you, Dr. Tawari.
Thanks again for having us in the program. But I want to make one point. One of the aspects of education and human values is unity in diversity. Lots of the problems we face in the world, interreligious conflict, inter-ethnic conflicts, is because, we have labels and we focus on the labels, whether it's political, economic, religious, etc. Education, human values tells us or teaches us to focus on what is uniting us. What is uniting us? The human values, which is common to every single individual in this planet, despite race, religion, or profession.
Well, I want to thank
And
all of
that's
you
one
for
way to bring about peace here.
I want to thank all of you for sharing with us on today's presentation. Of course, the entire aim was to explore the principles behind values education, its relevance in a Barbadian and Caribbean context by exploring what has been done in neighboring Trinidad and also in other parts of the world, and really to look at strategies that can be employed to effectively integrate these values into our communities. I think that we have ably started the conversation that really needs to be continued, which is what you have said, Mr. Vajwani. And congratulations on the writing of this book that you believe, to both the authors, Dr. Taplin and Dr. Pacman, which you believe can really be a how-to guide for teachers to be able to move forward with teaching in a different and maybe an easier way, as Dr. 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 Taplin has told us. So again, thank you all for sharing with us on today's presentation, and we look forward to further discussions on values education and how we can integrate it into our Caribbean society in a more comprehensive way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Well, that's it for this evening's program. We do thank you for joining us. Stay tuned to CBC TV 8.